Hey, welcome back everyone. In this video, we're going to be going over Substance Designer. We will be importing our maps that we generated in Zbrush, and we will be using those to build on top of, as well as generate additional maps such as roughness, ambient occlusion, and a RMAO, which is a pack map, and I will show you guys how to do that. So, to start off, I'm here in Substance Designer. Let's go to File, New Substance. Let's call this O1 Ponytail Palm Canopy. And let's leave our width and height at 2048, and let's just press OK. So it gives us our basic outputs, which is our base color, normal, roughness, metallic, ambient occlusion, and height. And this would be our inputs to get those outputs. So if you guys have ever used Substance Designer, you'll know that it's a node-based system. It works from left to right, and sometimes it can be pretty tricky, but in this video, I'm going to try and keep things as simple as I can, and we will go from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of these guys so that our nice little 3D view here goes black, and that's because it's showing nothing. And I am going to press spacebar to bring up my nodes, and then I'm going to search for a base material. So a base, this node essentially is it's a material node. It's exactly what it says here. It's used to create a base metal PBR material with options to work in metal, rough, or specular glossiness workflow. We actually are not going to be using metallic maps, so because our plant is not metal. So don't worry too much about that. But the way this node works and the reason why I like to use it is because I can come down here and kind of focus on one thing at a time. So if down here you'll see base color, normal, roughness, metallic, AO, height. And if I uncheck false and I just click this and I say true, I'm pretty much telling this node, hey, I want an input for my base color. And eventually at the end of all this, we're going to be ending up with something along these lines. And we'll have another output for our opacity and an RGBA merge node. But for now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to uncheck these and just say I'm going to work on my normal map. Pretty much the rule of thumb from what I've learned is you want to build up all of your height and normal information first and then move on to coloring. And luckily we've done most of that through our Zbrush map. So I'm going to import those maps. So let's go and find those maps. Let's go to our PSD. Oops, and I'm in the wrong drive. Okay. PSD. Oh, I'm sorry. Texture sheets. I almost had a little heart attack there. I thought for some reason our maps got deleted. So, we baked out of ZBrush a normal, a height, and a base color. So that's what I'm going to bring in here. I'm going to hit import, and then I'm just going to press OK. Don't worry about this. I'm going to show you guys how to do that really quickly. Okay, so here are our maps. You'll see that our height, our quote-unquote height map imports as a grayscale map. Our normal map imports as a color map, or the color mode is color. And for our base color, same thing, it's color. So for now, let's only focus on our normal. So if I were to plug this guy directly in here, first of all, nothing would happen in our 3D view, and that's because we have not told Substance Designer that we want to view this output in the 3D view. So the way we can fix that is we can double click on this and then right click and view that in the 3D view. And you'll see immediately that it gives us a nice view of our normal map. And it looks like we're also getting some metallic maps in there. I'm not really worried about that right now because we're going to fix that later. But I just wanted to show you guys that this is how we will be doing our workflow. So at the end of all this, once we've done all the work to our normal map, we'll just say, okay, hey, take this normal map output and then output it to our normal here. And this would be our final map, right? So again, the reason why I like to use this base material node is it just helps me control things a little easier, and when I see all these outputs, I get kind of overwhelmed, and this method just works for me, so that's how I'm gonna do it. So let's take this back a little bit, give us some space, and right off the bat, the first thing that I think I want to do is I want to get a curvature map out of this, and it's essentially just a map that shows our curvature. So from there, you can actually type in curvature smooth, and I just pressed spacebar, and I'm typing in curvature smooth. I'm just gonna hit enter, and you see that has an input for our normal map. So let's just plug that in. And I also forgot to mention that depending on what engine you're going to be using, affects your normal format. So ours is set to DirectX because that's kind of the native file format for Unreal Engine. If you're using Unity, I believe that's OpenGL. So either way, all it does is it just flips the green channel. So you can see that some values get inverted there. So I'll leave it at DirectX. Now, what I think I want to do is add a. I think what I'm going to do is let's set up an output for our opacity first, and that way we can get some transparency in here and focus only on what we're going to be texturing. So let's go over here and let's do a space bar and let's type in output. We just want an output node. Let's set him right there. And let's call this identifier as O for opacity. You can call it whatever you'd like, but that's how I usually do it. And then let's add an item for its usage for this output. And let's, under RGBA, let's change diffuse. Let's change this down to where is it? I'm blind. Sorry, opacity. There we go. And now this is where our height map can come into play here. So if you guys are familiar with what an opacity map is, it's basically a mask saying everything in white is opaque and everything in black gets masked out. So if I were to plug this map into the opacity output, again, nothing would happen, and that's because I would need to set this output node to view in the 3D view. So let's right click on that and let's do that. And this particular function, the opacity function, doesn't get, as far as I know, it doesn't get replicated here in the base material node. I could be wrong about that, but I don't see any input for that. I'll do some more research on that. But if I were to press view in 3D, and it's going to ask me, okay, well, what do you want to view this as? And right here we have opacity, so let's click that. So you'll see that based upon these values, this is what we get as far as opaqueness goes. And this may look good, but it's actually not. We want all of our fronds to be, all of our leaves to be visible completely. And the leaves that are most visible are the leaves that are completely white. And you can see that here. You can kind of see that it grays out. And we don't want that. We want complete white and complete black. And so what we can do is we can go back and we can press spacebar again and pull up a levels node and hit enter. And we can just pipe our original map through this levels node and then crunch it down. So let's crunch this white all the way down, like all the way. And now you can see that all of this has a uniform white. And then if we plug this into the opacity, now we see the complete opaqueness of our texture. So that's good. And that's something that I like to set up pretty early on just so that I can see, exactly what my texture is going to be. So let's go back up here and let's start off with creating some color variation here. And I realized that earlier I said, typically the workflow is you would create your height in your normal map variation first and then color, but also realize that, kind of to bypass that step in Substance Designer, we can always just import our own height maps. And of course, we could overlay some, some noise detail or something on this, but I don't think that's going to look very good, especially on this type of plant because these are such long, skinny leaves. So I think kind of the simpler the better in this case. If you guys want to see a better example of like a more noisy leaf, just go to my ArtStation, and you'll see some. I'll even post an example of a graph that incorporates some of that noise. Anyways, that being the case, I think it's okay for us to move on to color because that was the whole point of us being in Zbrush, was to bring in our own normal map. So from this curvature smooth node that we placed, let's add what's called a gradient map. And a gradient map essentially takes a black and white image and it allows you to color sample, to overlay a color sample onto that image. So for example, if I went to this gradient editor here in my gradient map node and I said pick gradient, and let's just say I clicked and I dragged across this little thumbnail over here. So I'm just left clicking and dragging, and then I kind of go up and I get some of these blues and then down. You'll see that it has this kind of crazy intense gradient that it picked for me. And if I were to go back to our base material and press true for our base color, you'll see everything turns black, and that's because we don't have an input yet. But let's just plug this in really quick. And this probably wasn't the best example. Let's go back to our gradient editor. Let's clear this again. Let's just say let's click up here to establish a gradient, and then let's just throw like a green on it. So based off of our curvature smooth map, it's giving certain values, and it's this gradient map node is assigning certain values of color based upon this map. So, you know, you can start to see how it affects certain areas here, and you can kind of see that updating live in the 3D view there. So you're probably thinking, well, how the heck do you color something like this in Substance Designer? And that's a great question. The answer is, if you're really, really, really good at Substance Designer, you can totally do that. But we're just going to do it the easy way and use our base material, or sorry, our base color node map, that we generated in Zbrush. And sometimes Substance Designer has a hard time previewing, probably because it's a 2K map, but that's okay. So now you're probably wondering, well, we have this map and we have our map that we got from Zbrush. How are you going to blend those things together? Well, I bet you can tell what I'm gonna say. It's called a blend node. So let's hit blend, spacebar, blend. And let's set our our ZBrush map that we got at base color map that we got out of ZBrush. Let's set that to the background. And then let's set this, for example, to the foreground. So you can see that it completely took away our background, and that's just because our opacity for this particular blend node is at all the way at 100%, and the blend node is copy. So if I were to go to like cycle through a bunch of different blend nodes, you can see that we get different results. And I'm just scrubbing through these on my keyboard with the down arrow. So anyway, for now, let's just see. I'm kind of curious just to see what our regular map looks like. So I can our ZBrush map, I can pipe that in here, and it will update automatically. And I do. So from ZBrush, I can already see now, and also I forgot to do one thing back in our base material. Let's go ahead and let's set our metallic map. Let's just say that it's true, right? True. And then let's say that this metallic map, quote unquote, has a uniform color. And we're gonna hit that, check that to grayscale. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm telling the base material node that the metallic map is this. It's just black, and black means that there is no metalness to this texture. So that's one way to cancel out your metallic map. I'm just gonna click that and press D to dock it. Just kind of like some cleanup work, you know? So I'm also noticing that there's some kind of strange, I don't know if you can see that on your end, but I'm getting some, it looks like it's something with our opacity map. There's a slight discrepancy. Let me see what's going on. Okay. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys are seeing that or not, but it looks like we're getting some weird kind of artifacting. I'm just gonna scrub till okay, till it's gone. Sorry about that. Um, anyways, let's go back here. So anyways, this is our regular base color that we rendered out of Zbrush. And honestly, it doesn't look that bad. I think I like this gradient from green to yellow to white. And I think I'm going to try and maintain that gradient throughout this process. And they're, you know, essentially we're going to be doing very minor tweaks to this through this blend node. But what I want to do is I want to show you guys a cool node, and it's called Sun Bleach. So let's press spacebar again. Let's type in Sun Bleach. You'll see that this particular node requires an ambient occlusion map, a normal world space map, and a mask. So luckily, we have our normal map already, so I can actually just click and drag and pipe that in. We also have a mask, and our mask is our opacity map, right? So I can also plug that in too. So now we're missing a ambient occlusion map. Well, Substance Designer is really good at generating one of those for us, and guess what it's called? It's called Ambient Occlusion. So let's bring in one of those, and you can see that an ambient occlusion map, or node, sorry, takes a height input. And when, so ambient occlusion maps usually look the best when you have a little bit of, height detail. And I know that I've been saying that this is our height map. And, technically it is. Like, you can kind of see a little bit of detail in there, but really it's more about the objects. Like, the white leaves were on top, the gray ones were in the middle, and then the kind of lighter ones were at the back. But that doesn't really reflect, like, our sculpt work very much, does it? I mean, you can kind of see a little bit in there, but one thing that we can do is we can go to a map that does have that information pretty noticeably. And if Substance Designer would decide to preview it, I guess it's not going to. That's our normal map. So what we can do to kind of get a better looking ambient occlusion map is we can tell Substance Designer to convert our normal map into a height map, and that node is called normal to height. So you can see that it does exactly that. It takes your normal map and it outputs a height map. So let's plug this in from our normal map. And you can see now that our normal map is starting to drive this entire graph. And that's kind of how I like to do my foliage. If I was spending some more time sculpting a really detailed height map, then I would probably use that to generate our ambient occlusion. But most of the time, our noise gets reflected really well in our normal map, so I just like to use that. And then, right now the map looks kind of not that great, right? So let's come in here and start tweaking the values of our node here. So right now, I'm trying to see if I can. It's kind of giving us this weird striation like patterns. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Might be our global opacity. No. Okay. So I'm just kind of curious just to see how this would look. So I can tell you right now, this ambient occlusion looks really, really awful. And we're starting to get glimpses of what it's supposed to look like. And ambient occlusion is pretty much just self-shadow. So what we really want is this kind of nice shadow line that we sculpted in Zbrush just to be popping out a little bit. And right now we're getting these really weird striated shadows. So this might be an instance where, you know, maybe the normal map isn't something that works very well. But there are a couple things we can try. One thing that we can try, let's see. Sorry guys, I'm just, yeah, that's definitely not gonna work. Let's delete this. And I think one of the reasons why this isn't working so well is that it's such a skinny leaf. Okay. Let's actually so I explained this before, but let me see if I can. Why don't you guys just forget everything I just said? In most cases, plugging your normal map into a normal to height and then adjusting the low, middle, and high frequencies will give you a nice looking variation of height in your height map. And this is not one of those cases. Ironically, this is actually a case where the height map that we baked out of Zbrush actually looks like it might work pretty well. So if you can remember, I was saying, you know, we want that nice shadow line of our leaves right down the middle that we sculpted, right? So automatically, without even doing anything, our ambient occlusion node picks that up. And we can come down here in our ambient occlusion node and we can adjust this and say, you know, basically the intensity, like what's the depth of our shadow map essentially. And I'm actually going to leave it at 0.05. And I think I might want to crunch these values down a little bit as well. So let's get rid of this first. And the way we can do that is we can just pipe it through another levels node. So let's try this. Let's say that we want a little bit more, we want our blacks to be a little bit more prominent. A little bit more to the point. And I'm just kind of messing with this. Half of working in Substance Designer is experimenting. So I'm thinking that something like that might be a little bit better. And I always like to compare between my last node if I'm even getting anything different, and it doesn't look like I am. Looks like I am a little bit, and that's good. That's fine. So let's just see. Let's see how that looks. So let's plug our new ambient occlusion map that we generated into our sun bleach, and you can see that it outputs this kind of nice edge highlight along all of our leaves. And let me just read to you what the sun bleach node does. And let me pull up the documentation right here, because I don't want to butcher the definition of it. So from Substance Designer, their documentation, it says it generates a black and white mask based on baked maps and user settings, similar to smart masks in Painter. So essentially, this is all we did was we created a mask, and with that in mind, we can use this mask now to kind of highlight the edges of our leaves and make it look really nice. So I'm going to now use that mask, and I'm going to plug that into another blend node. So let me kind of organize a little bit here. So I'm just going to kind of pull all my nodes back so that we have a little bit of space. I'm going to give us a little more room here. And then, actually, we do want this output. We're not going to use this green, actually. I think what we're going to end up doing is, I think we might just keep this as a grayscale node, and then set this blending mode to multiply, and that kind of gives us a little bit of a crunched look. So before we had quite a brighter look to it, and just off the bat it looks a little cartoony. So I'm just gonna keep this crunch feel, but probably not that much. So let's just take our opacity down, just maybe like, I don't know, maybe like at 0.5. That looks nice. And again, I have my reference up on my second monitor, so compare and contrast, right? Okay, so we now have this really cool mask from our sun bleach node. Let's pipe that into another blend. So spacebar blend, and let's put the output of our first blend into the background, and then we're just going to be adding this masked value on top. So if I put the output of our mask into our opacity here, essentially what it's saying is anywhere that it's white, that's what will be within this blend node, if that makes sense. And it's probably easier if I just show you. So let's say that we do want this, we do want these leaves to have like a little bit of an edge highlight. So let's just get like a uniform color, and then let's make it like a, I don't know, let's try like a yellow first. It might be too yellow, but let's just see what it looks like. So I'll plug this into my foreground, and pretty much we go from this to this, and it kind of gives us like a nice yellow edge highlight. And I think this kind of captures some nice detail there. I think I might want to crunch this mask a little bit to where, white is white, black is black, and then I don't know, maybe maybe that middle gray tone is fine. So let's just see what it does. So let's pipe in a levels, and then let's put our mask through here, and then the output into where it used to be. And let's just see, and we can see this in real time, right? So I'm going to be focusing on my my 3D view here and just see if this will work or not. So if I if I clamp this all the way, it becomes completely yellow. So I might need to zoom in a little bit just to see what exactly is happening. And essentially, the lower we crunch our whites, the more yellow we're going to see. And vice versa, the more we crunch our blacks, the less yellow we will see. And I kind of like a little less yellow. Maybe we can do a little bit of both. I want to crunch both of those values. But I also want to retain our, our nice detail in there. But already we can see that we're kind of getting a nice edge highlight there. So that's really nice. I like that. Let's maybe reinforce our gradient a little bit. I think that might help a little bit. And the way we can do that is, again, through our color. So let's make a little bit more room. So let's create a shape, and I'm kind of just thinking that I would want a nice circular gradient going out, and it kind of fades into the edge, the very tips of all these leaves. So let's see if we can create something like that. So I'm gonna press space again and then type in shape. A shape node is exactly what it sounds like. It gives you a list of shapes that you can generate. Since we kind of want one to be radial and go outward, I'm not sure why they call it disc, but, well, I guess I do know why they call it disc, but I would have thought it would be called circle or something, but you know what I mean. Let's, you can affect the scale and the size. I've seen some really cool graphs. I've done some before as well where, I mean, you can create really, really cool things by just layering shapes and stuff on top of each other. But for our purposes, we're just going to be using this to do kind of a fade out. So let's start off with a circle, and then let's do a blur HQ grayscale, blur high quality grayscale. And to get that kind of edge fall off, that's what this does. The blur intensity can be controlled here. I always bump the quality up as well. You can actually affect manually the intensity as well if you just hover over with your mouse and you click and type in a number. So I think 50 is too much. I was just trying to see there, and you can see as well that I do want a pretty gradual fall off, but it's now hitting the edge. So I can actually come back to my shape by clicking once, and it displays all of the properties for that node, that shape node here. So I can just bump the scale down and kind of get that nice fall off. And now, I think we want to break this up a little bit, because a gradient, it should be, not overpowering, obviously, but we want to see it, and we want to kind of find that fine line of not making it this obvious perfect circle. So I think we can break that up a little bit with a directional warp. So let's just let's do spacebar directional warp. And the input for our directional warp is going to be our, what we're trying to warp. So that's our output there. I'm going to click and drag this into here. And then it requires an intensity input. So basically whatever map we input into our intensity controls how much our top shape gets warped. So I'm gonna use a noise called Perlin noise. And if I plug this right in just as it is, you can see it kind of almost starts to look like a golf ball. And if I bump that intensity up, that's a little too much. It's too grainy, So let's just see if I can single click my Perlin noise and then take that scale down a little bit, maybe to like a 6, and then bump the intensity of the warp up slightly. So you can see it's starting to break up the circle shape a little bit. Not a lot though. I think I might want to, we can always try a different noise too. So if I type in noise, maybe it doesn't need to be something so bumpy. So I don't know, let's see what black and white spots does. So I can't, yeah, no, that's gonna be way too noisy. Let's try, maybe clouds 2. And then again, like I said, all of this is just experimenting, so that's kind of cool. It's a little noisy, and I'm still getting that. I'm still getting my circle shape. That's kind of interesting. Let me see. Noise. Perhaps. No. Okay, you know what? Let's just stick with Perlin noise for now. And then I think we might be able to break that up a little bit later on in the graph. So I think for now that's okay. And we don't really know what it's going to look like yet until we pipe it into our graph. So let's just see what it looks like, and maybe it'll look fine. But the first thing I'd like to do is add a transformation 2D. And essentially what that does is it takes our input and we can just move it wherever we want. And you can see that before it's not centered, right? So I just want to center it back again. But you'll notice, okay, never mind. I thought it was going to tile. I can show you guys how to fix that. I'll just show you anyways. So let's say we don't want it to tile. All we would need to do would be to go up here to tiling mode. It's grayed out right now, but if you go up here and you press absolute, that will free this operation and let you go to no tiling. So if you needed to do it that way, you definitely can. It doesn't really matter because this is just a singular shape, so I'll just leave it the way it is. Cool. All right, so now we have our gradient, or at least the shape of our gradient, right? We might even need to pipe this through levels, but let's just see what happens. So let's do a blend, another blend, and in our background, I think I'm going to use our old, or our previous blend node. And then let's just pipe this into our base color just so we can get live updates. And now what I want to do is I want to do the same thing as we did with our sun bleach, and I want to use our circle, or warped circle, as a mask. So I'm just going to take that output and plug it into the opacity. And you'll see again, nothing happens, and that's because we're not technically blending it with anything. We don't have anything in the foreground. So let's try another uniform color. And I'm thinking that maybe this one is a green. Oops, sorry, not a gradient map. A uniform color. And I can actually sample some of my some of the actual real world values that these reference photos have. And the way to do that again is just to click this eyedropper tool, and it brings up your crosshair, and then if you click and drag, it'll sample a color. Right there, that wasn't a good example because it was only one color, but if I sampled, let's say, that, I'm silly, I'm thinking of the gradient editor. I'm sorry, guys. It is very late. Well, it's only 9:10, but I have a newborn daughter, so I'm not thinking straight. Sorry, guys. That was this gradient map. I got confused. I apologize. Anyways, let's do a nice kind of green. I don't know, like maybe it's a brighter green, and then let's just plug this into our foreground. So you can see right now, this is our gradient, and it looks pretty awful. First of all, it's not centered with our canopy, so I want to fix that. If I double click on our blend node here, I can still have this pulled up, and then single click on transformation 2D, and it lets us adjust the parameters of that. So let's I'm gonna kind of center my gradient right there, and then I might want to scale it down a tad. So maybe it's like that. Right? Something like that. And then let's go back to our blend properties by double clicking on blend, and then let's just take that opacity down. So it kind of brightens us back up a little bit. And you know, if we wanted to break this up even more, we could definitely do that. We could we could blend this with a kind of a noisier noise, right? So let's say this is the background, and then the foreground is I don't know, our noise, which, let's say black and white spots 1. And then let's cycle through this a little bit. So if we wanted maybe it to be a little bit noisier, maybe it's a multiply, right? Or maybe it's let me see. It's interesting. So maybe divide might be good. I mean, because you get that kind of slow breakup The only thing that I'd be worried about is that this center core is completely white, opaque, and you only get that break up towards the edge. But that's kind of what we want, right? So let's just see what happens. So you can see it happening here very, very slightly. And I'm actually going to reset this and just make sure that it's being viewed in 3D. Let's also change this color to be like a crazy color so that we can see what's actually happening. So it is working. I think what needs to happen though is that it needs to get smaller and the breakup needs to be more centralized. So I'm trying to think of how we can make that happen. How about, first of all, what we can do is we can just scale this down. Maybe it's, yeah, maybe it's like kind of small, right? So it's like that. And then take this and then maybe the opacity. So yeah, we just needed to bring the opacity down quite a bit back in our previous blend. So maybe it's something like that. And I'm also looking at my live updates just to kind of see what I'm doing here. I think this will be just fine. So let's change this back to a green color. Sometimes I can just get lost doing some of this stuff because it's just entertaining. I like it. It's fun. So I want, it should be, yeah, maybe it's a darker green. Maybe that would work better actually. Maybe it's not that dark, but dark enough to where we can see that kind of splotchiness, you know? So maybe we bring this opacity down just a tad, like something like that. So it's very subtle, but you can see that we get like this nice kind of grungy dirt, and it slowly radiates out from our canopy texture there. So I'm pretty happy with that, and we can do this. We can go all day with this. You know, we could add another layer on top of that layer and on top of that. But I think with the way that we're planning on laying out these cards, I think that this is going to be just fine. You know, like I said, I can always just Control C and Control V, right? And then this becomes another breakup. However, it's just layered on top of our previous breakup. So let's just try it. Let's just try it. So let's pipe this in again. And then let's pipe this in to our opacity mask. Let's replace our old one. So now we have the exact same thing. It's just layered on top of itself. And eventually we kind of want to get a little bit neater with this, but I'll show you guys how to keep track of that stuff too by adding frames. Anyway, so let's try this. Let's try another uniform color. And then let's do that, plug that in. And then let's change now this shape to be smaller. So now it's like at the very, very core of our leaves, and I'm kind of just messing around. You know what? Let's actually have this be larger, to get like a more of a middle layer of like dirt and grime. So let's say it kind of meets up with this outer ring, or like the middle ring there, right? And then right now it's covering up our first noise, so I think we just need to change the blending mode. Let's try, I'm thinking overlay. Max lighten. Okay. So another thing we need to do is just change this color, right? It's really obnoxious. Maybe it becomes more of like a brown. And then we change this opacity to something quite low. But yeah, it's starting to work. It's starting to, so I can see my first breakup there. And then if I increase our previous opacity, so this is, this is all about just finding a balance and trying out different blend modes. If you wanted to go crazy, you totally could. Like, we could scale this all the way up and have it be just like an overall noise to our canopy, and that that doesn't look bad either. If we were going to do that though, because these leaves are so thin, we might want a little bit higher frequency noise. So we might want to just kind of go back and scale this a little bit. So this is a pretty minute detail, but hopefully you guys can see what I'm talking about here and kind of apply that to any other plants that you guys make. Anyways, let's clean this up a little bit. So I'm gonna select our second shape here, and I'm just gonna add a frame. And frames are cool because once you frame something, you can take this whole group of nodes and just move them around, and then also just label it. So let's call this outer dirt edge, and then let's frame this one. Let's call this one inner dirt edge. And obviously our normal map is driving most of this, as well as our height map. So might want to keep that there. Anyways, you guys can always tweak this as much as you want, but I just wanted to show this pretty simple graph setup, and then hopefully it encourages you guys to start, getting used to Substance Designer if you've never used it, and just layering things on top of one another to get a good output. I'm pretty happy with this. I might tone this down a little bit, but it honestly looks pretty good in the viewer here. One thing that we will need though is a roughness map, as well as an ambient occlusion. So we did that whole thing without an ambient occlusion map, but we already have one, which is our output from our levels back here. So let's just plug that into our ambient occlusion. And now you can see we're getting some nice shadowing with our canopy. And then one more with our roughness. So I'm coming over here and clicking roughness to true. We can also do height, but height is more, you know, in this type of model, we won't really be using a height map. But, you know, if it's something that you want to experiment with, obviously our version of our height map is way back here, so we would just plug that straight into height. Right? So, with that AO, that ambient occlusion, we're getting some nice depth and self-shadowing, but the last thing we're really missing is a roughness map. And as you can see right now, when I'm orbiting around and I hit Control Shift and right click, I'm moving the environment light around, and you can see that it's quite smooth. And obviously, this type of plant isn't going to be that smooth. It's not going to be shiny. So we need to assign a map to this guy and tell it that it's not so shiny, and that's through the roughness map. So we already have a couple of noises that we've generated here. I'm thinking that we can combine our height map as a version of our roughness, as well as our dirt mask that we made. So let's just see how we can make that work. Make a little bit more room. And then let's try and let's do a blend. And let's have our height map way back here. Let's plug that into our background. I guess I'll pull them down here. And then let's take our noise and plug him into the foreground. Now let's change that blending mode. So by doing a multiply, we can kind of get the best of both worlds. We get these little kind of spackles from our dirt map, from our noise outer dirt edge that we generated, and it's layered on top of our height map. So let's just see how that looks in our roughness. So if I plug this into our roughness, you can see that immediately we no longer have a very shiny bunch of leaves, right? It's shiny in some spots, and other spots it's flat. So one thing we can do as well is we can, if we wanted to control it a little bit more, we could do a levels, our tried and true levels, and then pipe that into our roughness, and then just kind of start to experiment with the values. So in roughness maps, the white values represent, you know, the wider the value is, the more rough it's going to be. And vice versa, the darker the values in the map, the more smooth it's going to be. So I just kind of want to, you know, experiment. I know that this isn't going to be a very rough, or sorry, a very smooth set of leaves. So I know that pretty much it's probably going to stay the same as we had it, but we have these kind of like spackles of dirt that are darker values, and I think that's kind of cool if we brought that out to be a little bit on the smoother side, just to get less, like some nice edge breakup. So I'm holding Control Shift, and I'm just kind of seeing how it's affecting our maps here. And so far, Actually, I want to crunch the whites a little bit. Okay. Maybe we take our grays down a little bit. I think something like that is going to be good. Feel free to, yeah, so you can start to see like some of these spackles get a little bit shiny, but not too much, and that's kind of nice. That's what we want. So let's stick with this for now, and let's say that that this is good to plug into our outputs. So now all we need to do is just assign our respective maps. Alternatively, we could take each output from wherever it's being piped in from, but this way we control it a lot easier. So base color goes into our base color, our normal goes into our normal, roughness goes into roughness, metallic is there, ambient occlusion, height, and we have our opacity here. So if I double click this, this will be our final base color. Same thing with our normal. We didn't change anything with our normal. We could, but I don't want this to be super noisy because there's going to be like a million of these fronds everywhere, and that would look really bad. So our roughness map, which we just completed, we don't have a metallic map, so that's going to be black. Ambient occlusion and height is a version of our previous bitmap there. So let's also do a nice save all. And I think that's going to be it for our substance designer. So I'm just going to make a new folder and call it substance designer. Designer. Okay. Let's hit save. And there is an export tool in Substance Designer, and it is, where is it at? I think it's under tools. Yeah, export outputs. So if you hit export outputs, you can tell it which outputs you want to export, and obviously tell it where. So, but you just set your destination by clicking there. So what I'm going to do is go to our texture sheets folder, and then let's just make a new folder. Yeah, that's fine because I think we're going to be doing PNGs. So, how might I set? Yes, okay, so PNG, that's good. So, I don't think we need our height map. I know we don't need our metallic map. And I think that's it. So base color, normal, roughness, ambient occlusion, opacity. Yeah, so let's just hit export outputs. Exporting in background, done, cool. There is one more thing I forgot to show you guys. Let's create another output node. And this is a good way to pack your maps into a single sheet. So eventually you'll only need to use your normal your base color, and then your packed map, which is this. So we're going to end up packing our opacity map, our ambient occlusion map, and our roughness map all into one texture, as well as the metallic information, which is just black. But that saves us on texture memory, obviously, and that's a good practice to have. So I just wanted to show you guys. We can do this. Let's call this identifier, the output. Let's call this RMAO, and that stands for roughness, metallic, ambient occlusion. And so the way we can pack these maps is through an RGBA merge node. And so R, the red channel, green, blue, and alpha. So red channel, we're going to say it represents our roughness. So let's just take the output of our roughness here, and then let's plug that into the red channel. RM, M for metallic. That goes to green, and AO to B. And you can see that nothing's happening, and that's because we don't have a alpha map assigned to that. So luckily we have our alpha map right here. Let's just plug that into our alpha, and we end up with, it should look something like this kind of like weird pink color, but you can see that all of that information is now packed into this one texture map. So let's just plug that in, and then let's just export this map as well. So I can do that individually just by clicking this Save Current Image as Bitmap button. So let's save that, and let's call this O1 ponytail palm text, and then just call it -RMAO. And let's save this as a PNG. Actually, I'm going to match it to this. I'll probably go back and change this later. You can actually change what it's called in the export options pretty easily. So, but I'm already here, so I'm just going to call this RMAO like that, and then hit save. And that's about it. So, sorry again if I confused you guys a little bit. I've just you know, working through this, and this is kind of just how I do most of my foliage maps. Some of them can get pretty complicated. I didn't want to overwhelm you guys too much with that, so hopefully this was like a good, if you guys haven't used Substance Designer before, hopefully this was a good introduction. And Allegorithmic has like really great instructional videos on both Substance Painter and Substance Designer. I highly recommend you guys watch those. And go ahead and check out my ArtStation. I'll be posting up some more complicated graphs and, you know, show what they do and stuff. So, all right, guys. I will see you in the next one. In the next video, we're going to be importing our low poly trunk into Max, and then we will be laying out these cards, and then I think that'll be one video, and then the next video after that will be a quick unwrap tutorial for the trunk, and then we will texture the trunk in Painter, and we'll be done with that asset. So that's pretty exciting. I know it's been a long journey, but I think we're gonna end up with a really nice asset. So I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for stopping by.